why the Army? Like, what led you? What motivated you to go do that?
In hindsight, it's much more obvious than I think at the moment. I was in 8th grade when September 11th happened. And I remember them sending us all home and just kind of being like, what the hell happened? Obviously in 8th grade, you're too young to kind of go do anything. But when I got to high school as a senior, I knew I was going to go play football in college. But for some reason, I just had this kind of draw to the military. And frankly, I think some of it was like just like egotistical, young 17-year-old male. Like, I can do that shit. I'm going to go shoot guns, run, prove to myself that I have the physical capabilities to do it. I think some of it was also, I probably didn't want to admit it to myself, but I needed the self-discipline. I was pretty wild and enjoyed the freedoms that I had to kind of do what I wanted. And so maybe some self-discipline would be helpful. But then the third thing was it was very clear to me that, hey, I can learn a lot, right? Especially around leadership and some of that structure, et cetera. And so when I signed up, I kind of tried to hack it, right? I signed a contract that basically let me go to college first, and then I would owe, full-time kind of active duty in the U.S. Army. But when I was a junior in college, I wasn't in ROTC. So I was doing reserve duty, once a month at the local kind of unit. And I was playing football, going to school, kind of had a lot on my plate. Didn't have time for ROTC. Well, you're not protected. So I got deployed literally as a junior in college. And I joke all the time that I pretty much was like a dumb, naive, young college football player before I got deployed. When I came back, I was like, yo, there's mortgages after this shit, right? There's kids. There's like, let me explain. I went and saw the real world and I came back. Let me tell you. And so like literally you can imagine a football team, right? Like all my friends who graduated when I came back. And these guys are like calling me grandpa. I'm a 22-year-old kid, right? And they're like, yeah, that dude's old. And so what it did, I think, was it really gave me kind of two things. One was it gave me a peek into my future, but let me go back and kind of like get prepared. And so that was really, really helpful. And it helped me mature, and it helped me really kind of, I think, take school more seriously. I was a horrible student before. I was an excellent student afterwards. And so, maturity is this like magic thing that happens, especially in young men, that once you get it, you're like, damn, where's that been my whole life? But I was fortunate to have it at that moment. And then the second thing is, you're at war. And so before you go, I think a lot of people are kind of like, yeah, I'm going to war, but like, you kind of don't know what that means. And even in training, it's like, you're shooting like basically fucking imaginary bullets at each other, right? You're just like, cool, I got him, he got me, whatever. When you get there and shit happens, all of a sudden it becomes real. And there's this like mortality that becomes very obvious. For me, it happened very quickly once I was there. And it really changed my life in the sense of, I realized like, holy shit, it doesn't matter what color our skin is, what country we're born in, any of this stuff. Like, we all end up dying. And once you kind of become aware of that mortality, you realize that you have this finite time. And if you're really lucky, you get to live to, average life expectancy or maybe even longer. Some people have it taken from them earlier. And so like, just go live your life to absolute fullest. Now, I sit here and I kind of, say this and I'm like, oh, I was mature, I was this, whatever. At 22 years old, what that means is like, you go get a motorcycle and you rip down the highway and you're like, I'm living my life, right? Like, I'm Superman. As you get a little bit older, you're like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be doing that stuff. And I actually should be, trying to squeeze as much juice out of this as I can. And so when you add the maturity plus the mortality, it ends up being this like really interesting mixture. And so in hindsight, the Army really not only gave me these life lessons, but then you add in all this leadership training and you're like, man, that was like the perfect training ground for a lot of the stuff in business. It's just really hard for a 17-year-old to articulate, especially to their parents have to sign a waiver. Hey, I'm going to go do this because it's a training ground for business, right? I'm like, no, I really want to do it. Like, please, I promise I'll be safe. I'll be the mailman. Like, I won't do anything dangerous. And so I think just naturally, if we look through history, a lot of business leaders, I think after World War II or Vietnam, I can't remember, it was like 80% of Fortune 500 CEOs were veterans. And so if we look around today,
I bet it was after World War II because all, the greatest generation, those guys went through a lot early.
Of course. And so if you look today, like there's a bunch of leaders across the business world who are in the military who never talk about it, right? Or who you wouldn't even know. It's not necessarily that they don't want to talk about it. It's just like they're 60 years old and people are like, I forgot what you did when you were 18, right? And so I don't know. It's just a great training ground, I think.